Hello, my dear friends, and in this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's begin. First, I'd like to start with statements and articles published by various mainstream media outlets before Trump's inauguration. For example, the New York Times reported that Russia would retain control over 20% of Ukraine's territory. Additionally, the New York Times stated that a ceasefire could be ensured by European peacekeeping forces, most likely led by British, German, and French troops. As for Donald Trump, he made numerous statements before his inauguration. However, he spoke very little about Ukraine specifically. His focus was on Mexico, illegal migration, and Russia. When Ukraine was mentioned, he only discussed peace and truth, which suggests that Ukraine was not going to be a priority for the newly elected president of the United States. Another significant article was published by the New York Times regarding Antony Blinken. The article explored how Antony Blinken, America's top diplomat, became a Secretary of War. At the time, the chairman of the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley, suggested that Ukraine take advantage of its battlefield achievements and begin peace talks with Russia. However, Blinken insisted that the fight continue. Before January 20th, there was primarily one individual responsible for prolonging the war in Ukraine, former UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Now, it appears that at least two people were involved in this bloodshed. Let's discuss additional noteworthy statements. For example, the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine gave a very interesting interview. According to him, no matter how much you defend, you will still have to retreat. He explained that Ukraine is forced to hold the defense, concentrate its forces, and essentially maintain positions along the front line. He also noted that Ukraine lacks the means to defend itself against Russia's advanced systems. Another important statement made by the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine was that the current mobilization efforts in Ukraine do not meet the needs of the armed forces. Some might interpret his statements as attempts to highlight problems and advocate for changes. However, in my opinion, when I first read this article, it seemed like excuses for his failures along the line of contact. Reading further, it occurred to me that there's a high probability that he will be replaced very soon. Now let's move to the ground situation. There are a lot of interesting updates. First, let's talk about the Slavic Direction. Over the past 12 hours, the Russians carried out several offensive operations toward a settlement called Svatov. As a result of these attacks, it's challenging to determine whether the Russians managed to significantly improve their positions. However, we know for certain that they took control of several tree lines and strongholds previously held by the armed forces of Ukraine. In one photo, we see Russian vehicles entering the territory, with infantry abandoning the tanks and moving into the trenches. A video published by Ukrainian sources shows the 36th Brigade repelling another Russian attack, involving numerous armored vehicles and tanks. Some vehicles were destroyed, but the Russians managed to improve their positions slightly. Further interesting updates come from the southern part of Svatov. I'd like to remind you that in late December and early January, there were reports that the Russians had entered the village of Novoselivsk and significantly improved their positions. Many reliable mappers even shaded the territory of Novoselivsk in favor of the Russians. However, it now appears that these Russian advances were repelled. Ukrainian forces, as part of counteroffensive operations, managed to regain full control of the village. This information has been provided by pro-Ukrainian sources. Comparing maps from January 19th and 20th, we can see that on January 19th, the Russians controlled approximately 40 to 45% of the settlement. By January 20th, Russian control had decreased to less than 5%. Russian sources also published videos showing their bombing and attacks in the region. The Ukrainian positions near the settlement of Univ were targeted in an attack. According to the author of the video, the footage shows the results of a Russian Iskander missile system strike and its aftermath. Russian sources claim that a significant temporary deployment point or the headquarters of the 47th or 41st Brigade of the Armed Forces of Ukraine was destroyed in this attack. Now let's move further and discuss the situation in the Kharkiv direction. According to the information we have, the Russians managed to secure the village of Terny completely. Several days ago, videos emerged showing the Russians clearing the settlement. Today, as of January 20th, reports confirm that the entire village has been captured by Russian forces. Let's now discuss the situation in the northern Kupiansk direction. Pro-Ukrainian sources report that the Russians, as a result of an offensive operation, have improved their positions in the northern part of the settlement of Dvorikna. In terms of control, the Russians currently hold around 40 to 45% of the settlement. Importantly, approximately 40 to 45% of the settlement is now considered a gray zone or contested area, while 10 to 15% remains under Ukrainian control. The Ukrainian-controlled portion is primarily located in the northwestern part of the settlement. Next, let's move to one of the most difficult areas, the battle in the Lyman direction. Currently, the Russians are attempting to launch the third battle for Lyman. The situation here is very complex, as reflected by numerous updates and icons on the map. Over the past 24 hours, the map has been adjusted in favor of both Russian and Ukrainian forces at various points. For example, by the end of January 19th, the situation on the ground showed the Russians had improved their positions along the forested area between Ivanivka and Kremina. Intense clashes continue for a company stronghold in this region. Both Russian and Ukrainian sources have published videos of these operations. Russian forces released footage of Ukrainian troops attempting to bring reinforcements and reserves to the company's stronghold, while Russian drones attacked Ukrainian vehicles. Similarly, Ukrainian sources published videos showing Russian movements toward the same stronghold and how Ukrainian forces bombed those advancing troops. This stronghold has become the primary focal point for both sides. If the Russians manage to take full control of this stronghold, it could open roads toward the settlement of Torsky. Additionally, the Russians have established complete fire control over the main supply routes in the area. It seems unlikely that the Russians will relent, as they appear determined to break through the Ukrainian defense belt and attack the town of Lyman itself. Furthermore, based on information and videos published by the Ukrainian side, the Russians have also improved their positions in the northwestern direction of the village of Ivanivka. The situation for Ukrainian forces in this area is very challenging, as they struggle to stabilize the front line. We will have to wait and see what happens next. Now let's turn to the situation in the Chervenopopivka direction. Over the past 24 hours, there has been little significant activity. However, some images from the area, particularly near the Diet mining complex, the last stronghold of the armed forces of Ukraine, show Russian forces bombing and attacking the central part of the mining facility. The attack was reportedly carried out using TOS-1A thermobaric rocket systems. It is likely that the central part of this stronghold will soon fall under Russian control. During the next day, and probably before Trump's inauguration, let's now discuss the situation in the Pakro direction. As you can see, we have adjusted the map in favor of the Russians based on a video published by the Ukrainian side. In this video, we see numerous instances of Ukrainians withdrawing and attacking Russian units in the settlement of Kwina. Many episodes were geolocated, and using one particular update from this area, we adjusted the map to reflect Russian gains. We now have no doubt that this stronghold has been captured by Russian forces. According to different sources, the village of Si itself has reportedly been completely captured by the Russians. However, neutral mappers suggest that additional confirmation, such as pictures or more detailed evidence, is needed to verify this claim. By the end of January 19th, the situation on the ground showed Russian advances. By the beginning of January 20th, the Russians had established control over the railways, surrounding fields, and, according to neutral mappers, had completely captured Kwina. Sources also report that the farms to the north of Kwina were seized by the Russians. Furthermore, according to various mappers, Russian forces have improved their positions in the settlement of Vok by capturing additional tree lines and buildings in the western direction. The Russians are advancing and are likely to continue their offensive, as only 5 kilometers remain before reaching the Neo region's border. Reports indicate that Russian forces have also improved their positions westward from the settlement of Slavianka. Both pro-Russian mappers and pro-Ukrainian sources confirm this development. This is a significant operation because securing the road between Andrivka and Yasenovita would enable the Russians to begin a flanking operation aimed at encircling the fortified Andrivka area in a cauldron. Regarding the Kurakov pocket, there hasn't been anything particularly notable in the past 24 hours, aside from regular military activity. The Russians are advancing, but not at the same pace as they did during the battles for Kurakov itself and the SP fortified area. The fighting appears to be more routine in nature. As for the town of Vasilivka, there have been updates over the past 24 hours. In videos, Russian forces were seen bombing and attacking the central part of the settlement, attempting to disrupt Ukrainian retreat efforts and prevent their escape from the cauldron. This may also serve as artillery preparation for an imminent final assault on the settlement. According to various mappers, the Russians have improved their positions slightly in the northern part of Kurakov and Vasilivka, as well as in the eastern parts of the settlement. At this point, there has been no concrete evidence to confirm Russian presence in the central part of Vasilivka. However, this seems to indicate the beginning of the end for Ukrainian control there. On the other hand, Russian forces continue advancing toward Nova, as Russian sources have published numerous videos showing their drone strikes on Ukrainian positions, vehicles, and equipment in the area. It's worth noting that with the fall of Vasilivka, the Russians are likely preparing to continue their advance further northwest. One of the main directions of attack is expected to be between the settlements of Nova Kamar, Nova Chait, and SC. This offensive is expected to unfold in the very near future.